And welcome to another episode of Cyberbytes, the podcast. I'm your host, Stefan Foley. And today it's my great pleasure to be joined by Bernard. And Bernard is the CISO at Corelight. It's great to have you on. How are you?
I'm doing fantastic. Thanks for having me, Stefan. As you mentioned, I'm Bernard Brantley from Corelight. We're a network detection and response company. I own security as well as IT here, so it's a pretty unique CISO role. Prior to landing here at Corelight, I led a threat hunting and threat intelligence team at Amazon for their consumer payments organization and did some pretty cool things at Microsoft before that.
Nice. Well, I appreciate the intro, and it's yes, we've got a good conversation lined up, so I'm keen to get stuck in. Where I like to start is taking it back and rewinding the clock, and we've had a brief discussion on this anyway. But can you share with the audience your journey into security first of all, and then we'll lead up to how you got to the position of a CISO?
Yeah, it's I can't remember who first told me this. It's an old adage, I believe, but it's often better to be lucky than good. I'd like to say that I spent the majority of my 20s in a figuring out period. I went to college, didn't finish ultimately, was trying to find my place in the economy. I worked every different type of job you can think of, from retail to construction to finance to you name it, I was doing it. None of those were ultimately fulfilling. Sometime in the late 2000s, I needed Wi-Fi. I didn't have Wi-Fi. I wanted to figure out how to get Wi-Fi, and it led me to Google a whole bunch of different pointers to a operating system called Backtrack at that time, and a little open source project called Aircrack and Aerodump NG. And ultimately, I got Wi-Fi, and I said, "There's something to this." So I started at the beginning. I think I was 28 years old. I was at a data center, pulling cables under the floors and showing that I could actually work on a Linux operating system with skills that I had kind of self-acquired through the desire to get Wi-Fi, and that was the ultimate beginning.
Yeah, interesting. It's a nice story because I feel like the security industry is really hard to break into, from my perspective, as a recruiter, right? And it's great to hear your story that you're someone that's not a traditional, like, typical background. You've managed to break in. What tip would you give people, like those on the fringes, like yourself, that may be figuring things out, and cyber could be a potential area of interest, or they stumble across it? From your learnings, how did you break in? What or advice would you give them?
I think that the most important thing to realize is you are generally more capable than you believe yourself to be. So, as I mentioned, I was working at Footlocker for $7.20 an hour prior to getting into IT. And if you had told me that I'd be managing systems on customers' behalves or learning how to wire up a server within 12 months based on nothing more than picking up an open source project and kind of playing around till I got Wi-Fi, I would have told you were crazy.
Right.
And the motivation coupled with I think or I believe that I can do better than I'm doing right now if I take on this challenge, it pays dividends. Again, thinking back, what, 14 years ago now, I think it seems like forever. It wasn't that long ago, but if you had told me when I started on this path that, hey, you trying to crack into Wi-Fi is going to lead to an executive role in a pretty substantial company, I'd have told you were crazy. But all is there, all is possible, and yeah, just take the bet on yourself. If it seems like a good challenge or seems like something that you want to do, don't let the kind of technical barrier or the overall knowledge gap
Yeah.
stop you. Dig in.
Yeah. Nice. And that probably leads nicely to the next step. So you broke into the industry, right? Can you just talk to us around your journey up until today's day since you've been in the industry and what that's looked like?
Yep. So I was at the data center. I was doing essentially IT help desk or server support. I took calls from people who had everything from a downed website to a broken server. I worked night shift, and I kind of continued to pull and pick at this security thing that had gotten me in. So, I had started skilling up in the kind of sysadmin, IT support side, but did not have a lot of professional experience in the security side.
Sure.
Um, I did what I was used to. I went back to digging into books and internet articles and playing with open source software, which led me to Splunk. And I found an opportunity online to go to one of two places, Houston, Texas, or I forget, somewhere in Virginia. They were actively looking for someone to come work on Splunk-based architect, or sorry, Snort. I said Splunk. I meant Snort. Snort, which became SourceFire through Cisco, but the intrusion detection system, Snort-based infrastructures in one of those two places. I ultimately went to Houston. I started as a systems admin, and very quickly showed that I had more than just the ability to kind of stand up, manage, support, and troubleshoot servers. That I could leverage my brain to do some analysis around intrusions and snort rules and all the rest of that. So I stepped from a systems admin into a network security analyst in pretty short order. I made it to senior analyst, and not too far after that, I was a researcher, looking at new and emerging threats and vulnerabilities, figuring out how to write detections for those things, interacting with customers to talk about the kind of holistic defenses around their network security, architecture and their enterprise more broadly, which led me to Microsoft.
Yeah.
I jumped into Microsoft and started to help build a SOC up, started to use some of the detection engineering and detection tuning skills that I had to guide the development of a SOC, which parlayed itself into me taking over security for Xbox Live, or network security for Xbox Live. And I say the rest is history. You already heard me on the kind of intermediary points between Microsoft and Corelight, but it's been a pretty wild ride.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a great journey. And what was that transition to CISO like?
I would say that the transition was tough, but it was also very fulfilling. One of the things that I ran up against in multiple stages earlier in my career was I know better than anybody how this should be done, regardless of actually if I did know better or not. And so I'd always find myself saying, hey, if I were making the decisions, I could move 50% faster. Or if I had ownership of this part of the security program, maybe we'd get greater efficiency in different areas. And so the CISO role in kind of managing the program overall gave me that opportunity. Well, what I figured out is that, yes, when you're working across multiple different organizations, multiple different personalities with varying priorities and varying goals, that things just generally move much slower
Yeah.
than you would believe. So that was an adjustment point for me. I think me picking up the IT scope was a bit different than what I had done prior. I was heavily focused in security, and although I had the support experience, I was not really attuned to thinking through the lens of business productivity and user experience as a kind of overall scope of things that I would own. So that was an adjustment. But I think I took to the executive leadership piece like a fish to water. I've got some pretty natural communication and problem solving skills. And I'm also not afraid to speak up. So being in a room with a bunch of other decision makers thinking about the business strategy and long-term goals of the company and how I could contribute to that, either by ensuring that the risk to achieving those goals was mitigated through what my security program or IT program could accomplish, but also, hey, I could pick up some knowledge and skills in other areas of the business, like human resources and finance and go-to-market and product management. And so it's been a pretty fantastic ride.
Right. And this is kind of linked, but was there anything that surprised you about being a CISO?
Um, the surprising thing, I'd say how good the CISO community is once you get access to it.
Okay.
So when I first jumped into this role, I'm listening to every podcast on the planet trying to figure out what's it like to be a CISO and like, hey, what's your first 90 days like? And oh my God, I don't know any other executive CISO leaders. Am I, flying by the seat of my pants, or is this the strategy that multiple others use? Am I doing the right things? And without, kind of a sanity check around you of other security leaders, it can get pretty lonely. And I think that was the first, 4 or 5 months of my CISO role. But luckily, and I'm having a conversation with him later today, one of the board members introduced me to the CISO over at Netscope, Lamont Orange, and he said, "Hey, this is normal. Here's what my first 90 days was like. Here's what I'm thinking about now. Oh, you're pretty close in these areas. You're nailing these. You might want to think about these differently. And oh, by the way, here's 2 other people you should talk to."
Right.
And at this point now, that has scaled to, I've probably got 100 different CISOs in my virtual Rolodex that are easily approachable, talk to, meet on a regular basis, and they're all open and willing to share. There's not really a like, let's close off, let's be competitive. We're all trying to do our own thing and don't want to give up any secret sauce. It's the exact opposite. Like the willingness of others to hop on a call, to provide some like slides that help you do the structure of your board presentation. It's just been fantastic. I would say that's probably been the most surprising thing for me.
That is, to be fair, because I feel like there's maybe other role titles in organizations that would be more cautious around sharing that sort of information at that level, right? So that's interesting, and I think it's a great learn for anyone. Like if you're stuck, or maybe you're feeling imposter syndrome, or reach out to someone or ask for a piece of advice, right? Because like in your case, hardly any network. Now look at you, right? You've got a network, hundreds within that space. You're getting advice. You can give advice. So I think it's just good advice for anyone at any level.
Yeah, I think that, and LinkedIn makes it easy. So, it's weird to think that 10 years ago, Facebook was in its infancy. Like, what is social media and how do people use it? No, my primary method of meeting people is face-to-face introductions or phone calls or friends of friends. And if I want to get to this guy, I got to wait till the next conference. Or maybe, I could do an email introduction and get them on the phone. We weren't really doing Zoom in large scale. And today you've got LinkedIn,
Yeah.
you've got some other methods of sharing, Mastodon, X, and you've got Zoom and
Yeah.
Slack. Like the ease in which you can reach out to connections or connections of connections are at your fingertips. And both myself and other leaders I've interacted with are typically more than willing, if it doesn't seem like a just flat out sales pitch, to respond and engage with any random person on LinkedIn.
Yeah.
You know, as an example, I had some questions about something that was going on at the White House. There was a report that came out about the new cyber strategy and the folks that were investing in K through 12 education and workforce development. And I'm like, hey, I'd love to know more about that. And I literally went on the list, said, oh, these 4 people were involved at that at the White House, sent a couple LinkedIn messages, and the next week I had a phone call.
Oh, wow.
And I was able to just get some like insight. I learned about how they were thinking. They introduced me to some other folks. And this is like leveraging social media, I think, for what it's there for.
Yeah.
So the power of what we have access to today, regardless of where you're at in your career, I think is pretty amazing. Again, if you're just willing to say, hey, I'll step out of my comfort zone, I am more capable than I believe I am, and I'm just going to go have the conversation and see where it leads.
Yeah, for sure. I think that's that point, stepping out of your comfort zone, right? Try and embrace that, see that as a positive challenge, and take it on. I think you're an excellent demonstration of that, right? And where you've got to. And in terms of the cybersecurity landscape, then everyone knows it's constantly evolving. What are some of the emerging trends or even threats that you, Corelight, are particularly focused on addressing at the moment?
So maybe a bit of an unpopular opinion. I see the emerging threats of the day as recurrences of the same age-old threats that we've been defending against since the beginning of IT and cybersecurity. What my primary focus is on is threefold. One, ensuring that the depth and completeness of the security controls internally meets my standard for discovery and sharing in time of crisis. Meaning that if I perceive a crisis to occur, my need for detective controls and visibility is less about can I find the unknown unknown, or am I going to have the tripwire that gets me 50% greater speed of execution and limiting the impact of the adversary. Yeah, I would love to have that, but it's not something that you can bet on. And even if you bet on it in a few areas, the question is, did I make the right bet? What I'm more concerned about is, do I have the totality of information that enables me to go engage other leaders in the business with the knowledge required to help them do what they need to do or make the decisions that they need to make? So the first is the are we thinking through what the potential impacts are, the environments that we manage in, and how best to get the right clarity given some event would happen that I can go drive effective decision making. The second would be the overall engagement. So this kind of goes both directions. I like to call it a sandwich. At the executive altitude, I ensure that the conversations across the executive table are both relevant to their concerns with emerging threats. You know, the word of the day is adversarial AI and what is LLM means for phishing and all the rest of that. And it's like, well, you know, it's essentially the same thing. Yes, the probability of clicking on a phishing link may be higher given an adversary's usage of LLM, but the next step is what we've been defending against in the strategy from day one.
Right.
So let's go focus on building up our resilience and response capability around that next step, not the kind of nuanced small advantage I can gain if I go focus specifically on identifying phishing emails crafted by LLMs. So kind of alleviating their fears by making the you know, I wouldn't call them common sense, but just plain speaking bets around what's happening, and then ensuring that their teams are informed and engaged. And then from the bottom, ensuring that everybody that works in my organization is tasked with go make new friends somewhere in the organization. If you're working with them on a support ticket, please see what it is other that we could do for them if they'd like to be brought into something that we're doing. If you're working with them on a security initiative, go reach out and see who else in their organization needs to be aware of us, what they're interested in, what they're working on, and really create those pathways between ourselves and the broader organization and ensure that happens from top to bottom. And at some point, the overall resilience level builds up because everybody knows who everybody else is. And in time of crisis, it's a, hey, how you doing? Yeah, I need you to versus hi, this is the first time I've ever called you. I'm on the security team. Something's broken. I don't know how to best to work with you. And you know, things don't go as smoothly that way. And then I think the last is continuously evaluating how we are serving customers and ensuring that we've got a clear understanding of the value of our customers' data to an adversary or access to our customers' environments for an adversary, the same as we think about our own. So really considering ourselves as a part of that overall supply chain, and if that changes any of the previous two dynamics.
Interesting. That second point you made, it all kind of ties into communication, right? And collaboration across an organization. That must be difficult to do though, as you grow, right? Have you seen any like teething challenges as you've been with the business and how the business is growing and expanding? Anything you can share there?
Yeah, listen, so I've got a fantastic CEO in Brian Dye. And one of the things that he had us as an executive team focus on is kind of looking at the information that we present to the board and that we present to the executive team through our QBRs and executive planning offsites, and compressing that down into the right size bits that can be effectively cascaded from the top of the organization to the bottom. So essentially, as we go and execute things or are planning things, the next thought is, what amount of this information needs to be cascaded, and what is the best form in which we can cascade that down and through. And then each of us on the executive team have our own set of things that we cascade, and we just share that out regularly, which does two things. The first is it gets the business in the mindset of, am I seeing from my executive leaders the type of information that I need regularly to verify that I'm on track, or that something needs to change with my decision making, or that we've seen the effective results from the output of our projects? And then how am I doing the same for my folks? The other thing that it does is forces us as an executive team to continuously evaluate how it is we're communicating across. Like, hey, this message didn't land so well with this team, and somehow that showed up in the executive survey that we just did. How do we need to remap and rethink that to ensure that there are clear lines of communication across the organization and between us as executive leaders? So I'd say in the beginning, yes, it's hard because you've got to get used to the other leaders around you. You've got to understand the right way to communicate with outside teams. But given some fantastic direction from our leader specifically, but more importantly, focusing on how is this information going to be cascaded out, and what are the kind of mechanisms that I need to ensure that that cascade reaches all the way to the lowest or furthest out points of the organization. That strategy really makes it pretty easy to figure out, how to maintain and continue to stimulate the right levels and types of communication in the org.
Yeah. It kind of seems, now you say it, it seems very like obvious or basic, right? But it is clearly not. But like the example you gave of just picking up a phone call, like the total difference, right? If I'm picking up the phone, we're in the same organization. I go, Bernard, yeah, damn, this has happened, or I need some support on this, versus, yeah, hey, never spoke to you before, don't really know who you are, but this is a problem I'm having. And it's just the cohesion, the response time as well. Everything will be faster and smoother.
Yep.
It's interesting. Cool. And looking ahead then, so like forward looking, what do you potentially see, and maybe the conversations you've had and your view as well, as the biggest challenge or even opportunities within the cybersecurity landscape?
Both a challenge and an opportunity. So I'll do a 2-for-1. I'm really bullish on knowledge graphs, which, in some senses are what's backing many of these LLMs. The question becomes, are we as security leaders and we as a broader knowledge management organization leveraging the underlying technology in ways that benefit us as a company or as a team, versus just trying to mold the outputs of these more general LLMs and figure out how to extract value from it. So as an example, I'm going to spit a number out here, but let's call it 15 to 20 individual, what I would call sensors, which is feeds of data from different tools and different organizational process tracking and different metrics and logs from different places that feed into my security data lake. And on top of that, I've got a number of analytic processes that run. I've got some static or signature-based detections that run, and then I've got some level of intelligence that is generated for kind of foresight and planning for individual organizations. The mapping for those things, the one-to-one mapping or the one-to-many mapping for those things, is somewhat encoded in the analytic process. But if I was to go ask a question like, show me the 15 features associated with this interesting event so that I can deliver against this intelligence question. It would take my threat hunters and my detection team a little bit of time to go say, yep, I've got it in these 4 different sources. That maps to here. I think Bernard's asking me for this. What do you think about these 3 outputs? Knowledge graphs give us the opportunity to design that schema or ontology for the types of questions we want to answer in the business, and then look at the explicit and implicit relationships in the structure of both the data that we hold as well as the people in the organization, processes, etc. So what I'm driving the team towards now is like, hey, what are the questions that we are going to be asked in 7 to 10 years, given that this program is hyper successful? And can we start building out the root of kind of relationships and data structures that would inform that, and then leverage some of the technology of the day to find the relationships that we aren't really thinking about today, but provide value to that same output. And that is all this construct around knowledge graphs. So I think the challenge is wrangling and kind of structuring the relationships within all the data that we have accessible to us today, both within the security program and within the broader business. The opportunity is that we have the technology that can help us solve that. It's just a question of, do the security practitioners and the business intelligence analysts think about what we hold in a way that's related to, hey, this is how an LLM is back-ended. Let's really go focus on knowledge graphs and ontology development and put dedicated resources towards kind of building up our own knowledge graph. Not to say that we need our own custom LLM, but building up our own knowledge graph so we can take advantage of this forward progress in AI and knowledge graph development versus just be recipients of whatever comes out of GPT-3 or Palm, which is the Google that's already baked into these large language models.
Yeah. It's super interesting. I think there's going to be a lot of advancement over the coming years, so it's going to be interesting to see how that plays out. And is that a very hot topic within your CISO community at the moment, like AI?
To be honest, the hottest topics in the CISO community right now are SEC regulations and LLMs. As important as they are, I don't want to give listeners another 45 seconds on LLMs since it's everywhere else. And just for me and where I'm at as a business, Corelight is still a private company. We do have a bit of time before we perceive ourselves as being a public company, and therefore the SEC regulations, while a good roadmap to how we want to develop our internal processes, the level of depth and fidelity we have around reporting and progress to defensible disclosure given a security incident, I've got some time to progress through that. So although those are the hottest topics of the day, one overweighted in current news cycles, the other I could speak on it, but it's not an immediate impact for me. That's why I chose the knowledge graph piece.
That's cool. And we're probably running out of time, so going to need to wrap up. I guess the last question on my side: what channel do you learn best from? Is it podcasts, reading, having conversations with people, something else?
I think that I learned best through a bit of reading and face-to-face interaction. Podcasts are fantastic. However, it's typically that next step in, can I get direct access to dig deeper into that person's mind to really see some benefit or learn new ways to approach things. I do quite a bit of reading on the knowledge graph front just because that's a passion area of mine, and see how quickly we can convert that both internally on the product side as well as on the security side into things that we can take advantage of. And then lastly, the larger scale CISO events that I've been a part of have been great learning experiences in how to communicate with the board and ways to remap how we reflect risk in the organization. I think that those are the top 3 for me. However, I'm here with you. I do a number of podcasts and webinars myself. I hope that they are valuable learnings for other folks. But if not, if you're listening to this and those things aren't getting you what you need, especially if you'd like to tap deeper into my mind, A, feel free to reach out directly. B, let me know how I can improve those things so that they are valuable. Because the word of the day is scale. And unfortunately, can't have the one-to-one knowledge transfer with everyone, and trying to figure out how best to put some of what's up here out into the broader space, short of writing a book or something, which seems like a massive undertaking.
It's tough, isn't it? Trying to find the balance. But yeah, you shared some great nuggets of information today that I'm sure people will find useful. So appreciate that. And will you be at RSA?
I will be.
Nice. I'll be there as well. So we'll have to link up.
Excellent.
Cool. Is there any plugs that you wanted to make before we wrap up?
I try not to do the plugs. I do like to shout out some of the great security leaders in my past, both to Suha Khan, who's a peer of a CISO. He's at Grammarly, and Sasha Faust at Grammarly. Without those two, I don't think I'd be as far along in my kind of conceptualizing both knowledge graphs as well as the impacts on the broader business. I've already shouted out Brian Dye because without him, I wouldn't have the direct leadership that's kind of evolved me from new CISO to I think a pretty effective executive. My entire executive team, because they put up with my questions, and not yet have they said this is overwhelming. The willingness to kind of bring me into their parts of the business, as well as work with me as a new CISO and new executive, has been pretty outstanding. So personal shout outs, not necessarily product or company plug.
I appreciate it. Cool. Well, yeah, Bernard, it's been a pleasure to have you on, man. Thanks for coming on, and we'll catch up soon.
Thank you.
Cheers, man.